Okay, so let's look at the key to this worksheet. So now here they're asking you to factor out the GCF from each polynomial. Now be a little bit careful. They're not asking to just write the GCF here. Remember, it just says factor out the GCF. So given this polynomial, you want to first of all find the GCF and you want to use it to factor this polynomial. So if you look at these two terms, 6x and a negative 12, the greatest common factor of those two terms is 6. Not 3, 6. Because 6 goes into 6 and 6 goes into negative 12. So the GCF is 6. So now I'm going to write this as the GCF. Remember, it's always the GCF times some polynomial that will give you the original back. So as we talk about this, you're going to use the distributive property to help you with this. So I get 6 times, so 6 times 6x, 6 times what is 6x? Well, it's just x. 6 times x is 6x. Minus, subtract, and then 6 times 2 is 12. So that's your answer. So you wrote this as a product. So the GCF times another factor. So you wrote this as two factors. So this polynomial can be factored as these two factors. My factors are, the first one is 6, and the other one is x minus 2. All right, over here, so the GCF of x to the 5th and 3x to the 7th, the GCF here is x to the 5th. So I'm going to write this as x to the 5th times, all right, some polynomial. So this times this better give us this back. So that's the idea. So x to the 5th times what is x to the 5th? Well, x to the 5th times 1 is itself. So you got to put a 1 there, though. Since I have two terms, I better have two terms in here, just like I did here. I have two terms. Inside the parentheses, I have two terms. Plus, all right, x to the 5th times what is 3x to the 7th? Well, first of all, I need a 3, because there's a 3 here. And then x to the 5th, remember, you're going to use the product rule for exponents. So x to the 5th times x squared is x to the 7th. Because remember, you multiply like bases, you add exponents. So I need an x squared here. So that's 3x squared. All right, so I always double check. X to the 5th times 3x squared. If you multiply it out, you're going to get 3x to the 7th. Now over here, I have three terms. They don't all have variables in common, so we're just going to look at the coefficients and the constant. So the GCF of these three terms is 6. So I'm going to write this as 6 times. Now notice there are three terms here. I need three terms here. So 6 times x is 6x. And then remember, using distributive property in your mind. And then minus, subtract. 6 times 3y is 18y. I need a negative 18y here. 6 times a negative 3y is a negative 18y. Subtract, and then 6 times 2 is 12. So 6 times a negative 2 is a negative 12. Okay, over here, the GCF, let's see what the GCF will be here. So the GCF of these three terms, I have 4, 8, negative 8, and 16, so I need a 4. And then there are x's in all of these terms. There are 3 factors of x here, 2 factors of x here, 1 factor of x. I need 1 factor of x. That's the greatest common factor. And so I get 4x times, all right, and so I need 3 terms here. I need a polynomial with 3 terms because I had 3 terms here. So 4x times x squared is 4x cubed, because it makes sense, because if I look at it, 4x times x squared, when you multiply like bases, you add exponents. So x to the first, that's 1 here, times x to the second is x to the third, and that's what you wanted. So always double check to make sure that what you wrote down gives you what you started out with. Minus, all right, so 4x times 2 is a is 8, and then x times x is x squared. So I need this to be a negative 2x. So 4x times a negative 2x is a negative 8x squared. Again, if you check it, 4x times a negative 2x, 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8. X times x is x squared, and that's what you wanted. And then finally, plus 4x times 4. That's all you need is a 4. You don't put an x because x times x is x squared, and that's not what you wanted. This is just x. So I already factored out that one factor that you see here. It's right here. So all you need is this constant. 4x times 4 is 16x. Okay, now over here, all these coefficients are either 1 or -1. So 1, -1, 1, -1. So the GCF of the coefficients is just 1. All right, now let's look at the variables. I have factors of a's in all these terms. Question is, how many factors do I need in my GCF? So for my GCF for this one, I have 4 factors of a, 2 factors of a, 2 factors of a, 3 factors of a, so I need 2 of them. So a squared. I have b's as factors in all of them. I have 7 here, 3 here, 4 factors here, 3 factors here, so I need 3. So that's my GCF. So my GCF is a squared b cubed. All right, now I got to multiply this GCF times a polynomial that would give me this back. So I need something with 4 terms. Okay, so let's think about this. So I have a squared b cubed as my GCF. So I need to multiply this by some factor that would give me a to the 4th, b to the 7th. Well, remember, a squared times a squared is a to the 4th, and then b cubed times b to the 4th is b to the 7th. Because when you multiply like bases, you add exponents. 4 plus 3 is 7. So this right here, that goes here. So it's a squared b to the 4th. Okay, I'm running out of room here. So I'm going to have to rewrite this underneath. So right here, that's going to be a squared b cubed times some polynomial. All right, so a squared b to the 4th minus. All right, so now you start out with an a squared. I've already factored it out, so I'm not going to need any a's in here, any factors of a's in the second term. I start out with b cubed. I factor out a b cubed. So the question is, a squared b cubed times what will give you this? Now notice what your GCF is this right here. So you need a 1 there, because a squared b cubed times a -1 is a negative a squared b cubed. Okay, plus, all right, so I have an a squared. I've already factored it out. I have b to the 4th. I've factored out 3 factors of b, so I need 1 left. So that's plus b. And always double check a squared b cubed times b, and notice that will give you a squared, and we multiply like bases, add exponents, 3 plus 1 is 4. So b to the 4th, and that's what you had here. And then finally minus, all right, so I start out with 3 factors of a. I'm factoring out 2 of them, so I need 1. I start out with 3 factors of b. I'm factoring out all of them, so I don't need any b's here. So this is your answer. So a squared b cubed times a squared b to the 4th minus 1 plus b minus a. Okay, now in 6, the way you want to look at 6 is this. So you have, and this is going to help you when we factor by grouping later on. So look at this in terms of 2 groups, 2 terms. So I have this term and I have this term of this polynomial. It's just written differently than any of these others we've done. But you do need to look at it in that way. So if you look at these 2 groups, they have an x plus 4 as a common factor. So I'm going to factor out the x plus 4. So you got to put that in parentheses though, because x plus 4 is a factor. So you got to put that in parentheses times. So remember, you're writing this as the GCF times. So the GCF of these 2 terms, the greatest common factor of these 2 terms is x plus 4. So remember, 2 terms, I need 2 terms in here. So x plus 4, if I factor out this x plus 4, if you cover it up, you have the factor of x left. I need an x here. And it kind of makes sense, because if you distribute x plus 4 times x is x times x plus 4. Minus, subtract, and the same thing here. If I factor out the x plus 4 out of here, I'm left with 3. And it kind of makes sense, because x plus 4 times a -3, if you distribute, gives me -3 times x plus 4. And so there's your answer. You wrote as a product. The GCF times a polynomial, that will give us these 2 terms back. Same thing here. Think of this as 2 groups. And so the GCF of these 2 groups, what you have in common is x squared minus 5. So put that in parentheses. And then ask yourself, x squared minus 5 times what what polynomial will give us these two groups back, will give us this polynomial back. So I'm factoring out x squared minus 5. I need a factor of y. Plus, I'm factoring out an x squared minus 5. I need a factor of 2. And always double check, if you were to distribute this, the GCF times all these terms, x squared minus 5 times y is this, and x squared minus 5 times a positive 2 is this. Same thing here. Think of this as two groups. The GCF of these two groups is x minus 3 in parentheses times, all right, now I'm factoring out an x minus 3 here. So notice when we talked about the GCF, the number of terms here has to be the number of terms in your polynomial in the original problem. So I have two terms here, so I need two terms in here. So x minus 3 times x is this. Now over here, be a little bit careful. You may say, well, I don't see anything here. Well, remember, there's no number, no coefficient in front of that parentheses is understood to be a 1. So you got to say plus 1, because x minus 3 times 1 is x minus 3. So you needed a 1 there. Okay, now that idea is going to help you later on. Okay, now over here you have this polynomial, except you have fractions as coefficients. So the way I would do this is this idea. I would look at the GCF of the numerators first. So 1, 5, and negative 7, the GCF is 1 in terms of the numerator. So let's just look at it that way. So in terms of my fraction, my GCF of the numerator is 1. If I look at the denominator, they're all 6's. 6, 6, 6. So the GCF of there is 6. So in terms of the fraction, the GCF is 1/6. That's the GCF. In terms of the variables, I have excess factors in all of them, so I'm gonna need at least one factor of x here. Question is, how many do I need? I have 5, 3 here, 8 factors here, so I need 3 of them. So that's my GCF. Now you got to write it as a GCF times some polynomial, so it's got to look like this. You got to say 1/6x cubed, no other way, times 3 terms will give me this back. Okay, so 1/6x cubed times, this is what we have, 1/6x cubed times what will give me 1/6x to the 5th? Well, it's going to be x squared, because 1/6x cubed times x squared gives me 1/6x to the 5th. So when you multiply like bases, you add exponents. 3 plus 2 is 5, so I need an x squared here. Plus, all right, now I need a 5/6 here. So you gotta remember that when you multiply fractions, 1/6 times 5 over 1 is 5/6. So I need a 5. So that has to be a 5 right here, because 1/6x cubed times 5 is 5/6x cubed. So I've already factored out all of the x cubes out of here. Minus, same thing here, that needs to be a 7, because 1/6 times 7, or a negative 7, is a negative 7/6. 1/6 times a negative 7, remember you can write this as negative 7 over 1, is a negative 7/6, and that's what you had here. So this needs to be a negative 7. I had 8 here. I'm factoring out 3, so I have 5 left. So I need to write this as x to the 5th. And so that's your answer. And then finally, over here, you have 4 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. 6a cubed, a negative 12a to the 7th, a negative 3a, and 9. And so if you look at the coefficients and the constant, that's a constant. No variable associated with it, it's a constant. 6, negative 12, negative 3, and 9, the GCF is just 3, because there are a's in 3 terms, but not all of them. So the GCF is only 3. So I'm going to say 3 times, I have 4 terms here, I need 4 terms here. So 3 times 2a cubed is 6a cubed, minus 3 times 4a to the 7th is a negative 12a to the 7th, minus 3 times a, 3 times a negative a is a negative 3a, and then plus 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so that's going to take care of the key to worksheet D.